Greetings and welcome to Boardroom Minutes. My name is Mark S. Brantley, and I'm glad that you're tuning in on today for another interesting episode as we discuss things associated with the boardroom. And our topic on today is crisis in the boardroom, how boards lead through uncertainty. Again, welcome back to Boardroom Minutes, which is your premier channel for clear, concise insights into the issues that shape today's boardrooms at for profit corporations, nonprofit corporations, and religious institutions like churches. Now, before we dive into our topic on today, if you are not a subscriber, why don't you do me a favor and hit that subscribe button? I know all of the content creators always ask you to hit the subscribe button, but why don't you do that if you find that this content is beneficial to you? And then at the end, if you find that it was edifying, then why don't you hit the like button as well? All right, let's go into our topic, which is crisis in the boardroom and how boards lead through uncertainty. Now, every boardroom faces or will face moments of crisis. And if you haven't, as a board member yet, then keep on having your board meetings. You will eventually experience a crisis, whether it's a financial setback or leadership transition can sometimes cause crisis, cybersecurity breaches, or a public controversy and even an internal conflict. All of these items can cause a crisis. And in these moments, fear and uncertainty often fills the room. But leadership isn't tested when things are calm. And you have to remember that. It's proven when things seem to fall apart. That's when you test your mettle. In this episode, we'll discuss how boards can lead through uncertainty by staying grounded, being decisive, and also united when the pressure is on. Well, first, you have to understand the nature of the crisis because crisis doesn't just threaten the organization, it tests the board's foundation. And in a crisis, typically three things happen. One, pressure rises because decisions must be made quickly. Two, emotions intensify because there's the tendency for blame, for fear to set in, and even confusion to take over. And three, trust gets tested between management, between the board, as well as the public. But the key is remembering this: a crisis doesn't create leadership, it reveals it. So, boards that have clarity, discipline, and unity before the storm can withstand almost anything. Those that don't often find themselves in collapse under the weight of panic. I would like to share four key steps when crisis hits your organization or corporation. Step one, stay anchored in the facts and not in fear. Because when a crisis hits, panic looks for the microphone and fear loves confusion. So you have to slow it down. The first step for every board is to pause and to gather facts. You don't need conjecture, you don't need speculation. What you need are the facts. What actually happened? What's the scope of what occurred? And the timeline in which it occurred? What do we know and what we don't know? What's still uncertain? And boards must rely on verified information from management, from auditors, or even external auditors or experts, not just rumor and not emotion. because leadership starts by slowing down the noise long enough to hear what matters, and that's the truth. An example, let's assume a credit union faces a cybersecurity breach. Don't rush to issue statements before you confirm all of the details. You act with urgency, of course, but you must lead with clarity. Step two, you have to communicate with calm and consistency because in times of uncertainty, silence can be more damaging than bad news. The last thing you want to do is sit on a crisis. You can pause, but don't delay. And boards should ensure that the organization communicates clearly, consistently, and compassionately with all stakeholders. That's including staff, that's including the members of your organization, if you're a credit union, for example, your donors, and also the public, your customers, the people you serve. And effective crisis communication means one, to be transparent, share what you know and when you know it. Also, be empathetic, show that you care, not just that you're in control. And then also be unified. The board and management should speak with one voice and with clarity. In crisis, people don't expect perfection, but they do expect honesty. For instance, for a church, when a church faces a leadership scandal, immediate transparency and humility restore that far more uh, so than silence or spin. Humility restores trust. Remember, we talked about in the last episode about trust and transparency and truth. So, here, when a church faces a leadership scandal, there must be immediate transparency and humility to restore trust rather than there being silence or spin. Step three, strengthen the board's decision process because during uncertainty, boards must make decisions fast, but not hastily. You can work with speed, but it must be with deliberate speed and not haste. That's why strong process ahead of time is your lifeline. Here's how to strengthen your process. You have to clarify roles. Management executes, the board oversees, and you have to stay in your lane. Don't blur those lines. You also have to use your committees effectively. We talked about this in a previous episode, the power of committees. Having strong committees, you're able to gather facts more efficiently and effectively. And for those committees, you should have an audit committee, governance committee, an executive committee, and they should mobilize to assess the specific risks that are involved. Then you also need to keep records. You have to document discussions, not just within the crisis, but previously so that you have a record of what occurred. And these records, these discussions and decisions are there for accountability. Then also seek expert input. You may not, as a matter of fact, you may need an independent perspective. So seek outside counsel, seek an outside auditor to come in if you find that there are internal issues or conflicts. That can be financial, it can be legal, it could be PR guidance on how to navigate this crisis so that it can prevent costly mistakes. The best boards don't abandon governance in crisis, they double down on it. That's why it's important to strengthen your governance practices ahead of time. And good boards hold process steady while steering through the storm. Now, let's get to step 4. You have to focus on mission and not just survival. That's important because you're there to serve your members, your stakeholders. So the focus is on mission. And in times of uncertainty, fear tells boards to focus, guess what, on? Survival, not on the mission. But your faith and vision should remind you to focus on purpose. Every crisis is a test of whether the organization's mission still drives its decisions. Because what's important, the mission or the survival? Now, yes, you want the organization to survive, but if it ceases to serve its members, if it ceases to serve its stakeholders, then why are you in existence? Why does it need to survive? So you have to ask yourself as a board, how does the response to this crisis reflect the organization's values? What would what will our members, employees, or in a church scenario, congregation, remember about how we handled this? Remember, we talked again about truth, transparency, and that yields trust. And then, how can we use this challenge to grow stronger and more faithful? How can we use this crisis to do better? Now, Romans, as I always do, I like to interweave biblical support and scripture in every episode. And in Romans chapter 5, verse 3 through 4, it says, "We glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope." Now, that's not just theology, that's not just Bible in a vacuum, but that's an expression of leadership because crisis, tribulations, they bring strong character. Crisis builds character when it's met with courage. And in my conclusion, a crisis doesn't ask for your permission. Take it from me. I've experienced plenty of crisis serving on a particular board. Doesn't ask for your permission. But you know what? It does reveal your preparation. And boards that lead through uncertainty, they don't panic. They pause, they'll even pray, and then they'll plan. They tell the truth, they stay transparent, and act with trust and unity. So we're going to end it right there. Thank you for tuning in to BoardRoom Minutes. We talked about crisis in the boardroom, how boards lead through uncertainty. So after hearing this episode, again, if you felt it was beneficial, why don't you hit the like button? And then also be a subscriber so that you are made aware of our episodes that are coming up in the near future. Hope to see you on next week. This is Mark S. Brantley of BoardRoom Minutes signing off. Take care.